Chapter 1. The Ghost Ship. Sailors tell a story about a big, black pirate ship. They see it sometimes when the fog is thick. The ghostly pirates on the black ship can never leave it because the ship carries a curse. But this is only a story. There aren't really any ghosts. Or are there? The Dauntless sailed slowly through the thick fog. It was a big ship, and it carried 50 guns and 100 strong men. 12-year-old Elizabeth Swan stood at the front of the ship. She was on her way to Port Royal in Jamaica. Her father was the new governor there. "I'd like to meet a pirate," she thought. She remembered an old song. "Yo-ho, yo-ho, a pirate's life for me. Yo-ho, yo-ho, a pirate's life." Suddenly, a sailor called to her.
"Quiet, miss,"
he said.
"Pirates sail this ocean. You don't want to call them to us."
"Mr. Gibbs," Captain Norrington shouted at the old sailor. "Don't be afraid," he said to Elizabeth. "There aren't any pirates here today." "I'm not afraid," said Elizabeth. But she knew the stories about pirates and fog. They looked down at the dark water. There was something there. What was it? Wood? A box? "Look!" Elizabeth shouted to the captain. "It's a man," said Captain Norrington. "No, it's not," said Elizabeth. "It's a boy. Quickly, quickly, help him! Somebody help him!" Captain Norrington called to his men. "Get him out!" The men pulled the boy onto the Dauntless. "Is he okay?" asked Elizabeth. "Oh, yes, miss," said one of the sailors. "He's fine." "But where did he come from?" asked Elizabeth. "There's nothing out there, only the ocean." Nobody spoke. And then a big ship came out of the fog. Every man on it was dead. The men ran to the side of the Dauntless and looked down at the water. Were there any more people there? "Miss, you stay with the boy," the captain said to Elizabeth. Elizabeth sat down next to the boy. He was about the same age as her, 10 or maybe 11. Slowly, his eyes opened. "Hello," said Elizabeth. "My name is Elizabeth Swan." "I'm Will Turner." And then he was asleep again. Elizabeth watched him. Then she saw something inside his shirt, something gold. Slowly, she took it from him. She looked at it carefully. It was a medallion, and there, on the front, was a skull and crossbones. "Oh," she thought. "Will Turner, you're a pirate!" When Captain Norrington came back, she quickly put the medallion under her dress. "Did he speak?" he asked. "His name is Will Turner," she answered. Inside her dress, she felt the gold medallion. She looked out at the ocean, and there, in front of her, was a big, black ship, and it had the skull and crossbones, too. The black ship turned away, but Elizabeth was suddenly very afraid. Chapter 2. Port Royal. Elizabeth opened her eyes. She was in bed in the governor's house in Port Royal. She looked at the gold medallion and smiled. Every day she thought about the medallion, and every day she thought about Will Turner. Was it really 8 years? She heard her father. "Are you in bed? Get up now." Governor Swan came into the room.
"It's a beautiful day," he said. "And look, I have something for you."
He gave Elizabeth a box. Inside, there was a beautiful new dress from London.
"You can wear it today," he said, "for Captain Norrington's party."
"Oh, him," said Elizabeth.
"He's a good man. And he likes you, you know. He likes you very much. And after today, he will be a Commodore."
The governor left the bedroom and went back to his office. Will Turner was there. He was now 20 years old and a big, strong young man.
"Mr. Turner," said the governor, "good day."
"Good day," said Will.
"Do you have it?"
"Yes, sir. Here it is." He gave the governor a long box. The governor opened it carefully. He took out a sword and smiled.
"Ah, very good. A fine job."
He wanted to give the sword to the new Commodore Norrington. "Thank you, sir," Will said. Will looked up and saw Elizabeth. She looked beautiful in her new dress.
"Ah, Elizabeth,"
the governor said.
"A wonderful dress."
But Elizabeth's eyes were on Will. "Hello, Will," she said. "I thought of you last night. Do you remember that first day, on the ship?" "Of course I remember, Miss Swan," said Will. "I can never forget that day." He smiled at her. The governor wasn't happy with this conversation.
"We have to go,"
he said to Elizabeth.
"It's time."
He took Elizabeth's arm. Elizabeth smiled at Will. "Goodbye, Mr. Turner," she said. The governor and his daughter left the house and went out into the busy street. Chapter 3. Captain Jack Sparrow. Captain Jack Sparrow looked at the ships in Port Royal. His boat was small and old. He wanted a new, bigger ship. He had no money, but that wasn't a problem. Jack Sparrow was a pirate, and he had a plan. He looked at the Dauntless for a long time. It was a big ship with 50 guns. Then he saw the Interceptor. It was smaller, but faster. He wanted it. There were 2 sailors next to the Interceptor. Jack went to them.
"Hey, you can't come here," one of them said.
He looked at Jack's old boat and laughed.
"Who are you? And what's that?"
"That's my boat," said Jack. He smiled at the man and looked carefully at the Interceptor. The man smiled back. "I like your ship," Jack said.
"Yes, it's the fastest ship in the Caribbean."
"Really?" said Jack. "Isn't the Black Pearl the fastest ship?" The sailor laughed.
"Ghost stories are for children,"
he said.
"It isn't a story,"
said the other sailor to his friend.
"I saw that ship."
He turned to Jack, but Jack wasn't there. He was on the Interceptor. The sailors ran after him.
"What are you doing?"
they shouted.
"You can't go up there! What's your name?"
"Smith," Jack answered.
"And what are you doing in Port Royal, Mr. Smith?"
"I want one of these ships," Jack said. The sailors thought about this. High above the harbor, Elizabeth stood with Commodore Norrington. It was a hot day, and her dress was very heavy. "Look at the ships down in the harbor," she said. "They're beautiful." "And you are more beautiful," said Commodore Norrington. "You're a fine woman." Elizabeth didn't say anything. "I hope," he said, "I hope that one day you will marry me, Elizabeth." Marry? Elizabeth said. Marry you? She moved back, but she couldn't move easily in her new dress. Suddenly, she fell. She fell down into the harbor below. On the interceptor, Jack and the two sailors saw everything. The sailors didn't move. "Quick!" Jack said to them. "Aren't you going to help her?" "But we can't swim." "Here," said Jack. "Take these and don't lose them." He gave them his hat and his gun. Jack jumped into the water and swam to Elizabeth. She was under the water. He took her hand and tried to help her, but her dress was too heavy. Jack found his knife and cut the dress off. Then he pulled the young woman out. Commodore Norrington and Governor Swan ran down to the harbor. Thank you, said the governor. "Elizabeth, my dearest daughter, are you okay?" Yes, I'm fine," said Elizabeth. She sat up. Norrington looked at Jack. "Good man," he said. "Thank you. Give me your hand." Then he saw it, a white P on Jack's hand. "I know you," he said. "You're a pirate." He looked at Jack carefully. "Your name is Jack Sparrow." "Captain Jack Sparrow, please," said Jack. "I don't see your ship, Captain," said Norrington. "And you're a pirate." "He wanted to take one of our ships." The sailors from the interceptor were with them now. Norrington looked at Jack and laughed. Then he turned to the sailors. "Take him away," he said. "Put him in chains. Now!" The sailors put chains on Jack. "You can't do that," said Elizabeth. "Maybe he is a pirate, but he helped me." Suddenly, Jack moved. He jumped behind Elizabeth and put his chains around her. The sailors showed their guns. No! Don't shoot," shouted Norrington. "Be careful. He'll kill her." Jack pulled Elizabeth back. "I really don't like you," Elizabeth said to him. "I helped you, and now you're helping me," Jack said. He smiled. Then, suddenly, he took the chains off Elizabeth and ran. "Get him!" shouted Norrington. "Get him now!" Chapter 4. In the Blacksmith Store. Jack ran down one street and up the next. He turned left. He turned right. He ran and ran. Then he listened. He couldn't hear the sailors. He was free. But he had the chains on his hands. He saw a store and opened the doors. Then he went in, very carefully. It was dark, but he could see some swords and knives. "Ah, a blacksmith store," he thought. "I can use one of those knives." He took one and started to cut the chains. It was hard work, and it hurt his hands. But after a minute or two, the chains fell to the floor. Suddenly, Jack heard a sound behind him. It was Will Turner. "What are you doing here?" asked Will. He looked at Jack. "Oh, you're the pirate. People are looking for you." He took a sword. "Is that a good idea?" asked Jack. Will didn't speak. He put up his sword and looked at Jack. They fought. Jack was quick, but Will was quick too. "You can use a sword," said Jack. He turned and ran to the door, but Will was too quick for him. He threw his sword at the door. It went over Jack's head. Jack tried to pull it out, but he couldn't. And now he couldn't open the door. He turned to Will and smiled. "That was good," he said. He looked at the other door to the store. "But you're between me and that door, and now you have no sword." Will took another sword, and they fought again. "Do you make these swords?" Jack asked. "Yes, and I use them for 3 hours a day after work, too," Will answered. "Why don't you find a girl? It's more exciting," Jack said. He took out a gun. "Now, move away from the door," he said. Behind Jack, Will saw his boss, Mr. Brown. In Mr. Brown's hand, there was a bottle. Slowly, the blacksmith moved his arm up, and then he hit Jack on the head, hard. Jack fell to the ground. Norrington arrived with his sailors. He looked down at Jack. "Good work, Mr. Brown. Remember this day. On this day, Captain Jack Sparrow almost got away." Mr. Brown looked at the glass on the ground. "He broke my bottle," he said. Chapter 5. Pirates in Town. It was night, and there was a thick fog in Port Royal. Through the fog came a ship, a tall, black ship. It carried the Skull and Crossbones. In her bed in the governor's house, Elizabeth tried to read. She couldn't sleep. She saw the fog, and she thought about the pirates and the ghost story. Down in the town, Will left the store and stood in the street. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. In his cell, Jack sat and thought. What could he do? How could he get out of this place? He looked out at the harbor and at the fog, but he wasn't afraid. Suddenly, there was a loud noise from guns. "I know those guns," Jack thought. "It's the Pearl." He heard the guns again, and again. Jack looked down at the town. It was on fire. Smoke came from the houses and the stores. People ran out into the streets. And then, out of the smoke and the fog, the pirates came. They ran through the town with their guns and their swords and their knives. They started more fires and carried things away from the houses. Will ran back into the store and took a sword and a knife. Then he went outside again. "Elizabeth," he thought. "I have to help Elizabeth." He started to run to the governor's house, but he didn't see the man behind him. The pirate hit him hard on the head, and Will fell to the ground. Upstairs in her room, Elizabeth looked out her window and saw the fire and the smoke in the town. Then she looked down and saw 2 pirates at the door of the house. What could she do? Where could she go? One of the pirates looked up. Ragetti was very dirty, and he only had one good eye. With it, he saw Elizabeth. "Look, Pintel," he said. "Up there." Pintel looked up and smiled. The pirates ran up the stairs. Elizabeth was afraid and quickly closed her bedroom.